Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Newbie Photographer Podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Holritz. Apologies for a slight bit of delay. I had a little bit of a glitch in the schedule, if you will. But we're here. We made it. We're live. And I'm going to introduce our return guest, which might be a first for the Newbie Podcast. We're mixing things up a little bit. I'll give you some context to that here in just a second. But for those of you that might be live streaming or watching the replay of the live stream, don't be shy. Whenever you come to join these live streams, don't hesitate to comment, ask questions. You can send us some funny emojis if you want to, but I really want you to engage in the conversation at hand. And that's one of the benefits of this live stream is that you can ask not only the guest questions, but ultimately ask me questions and be part of the conversation. So I hope you'll do that. For those of you that are listening to the audio version of this after the fact, as I always say, make sure to follow us, Newbie Podcast, at Newbie, N-O-O-B-I-E Podcast on Instagram. And you can keep up to date with the upcoming live stream schedule so you can come be part of it. Please make sure to do just that. All right, enough of that. I want to introduce our return guest. I think maybe our first return guest, Meredith. Meredith is here. And Meredith, I'm going to try this again. Make sure I get your last name correct. Detchantala, is that correct?
Yep, very good.
Is the A is an A sound or an A sound? Detchantala? Should we be fancy about it?
You can say it however you want, really.
Okay, fair enough. Well, thanks again for coming back and doing the show. And as I alluded to at the very beginning, of course, for listeners, viewers, this is a little bit of a twist, a plot twist, if you will, in this show. So we've been doing a couple of different series. One is I Wish I Knew, which is where I have established photographers come on the show, share something they wish they knew when they first got started in business. And that will hopefully give new photographers a little bit of perspective. The other series that we've been doing is I Like to Know. So having relatively new photographers come on the show and say, hey, Nate, I'd like to know a little bit more about this particular topic or that particular topic. Last week, episode 25, for anybody who's listening or watching, make sure you go back and listen to that episode first if you haven't already. Meredith, you came on the show and we talked about finding some type of balance. It's kind of different for everybody, right? But some type of balance between family and work life. Is that right?
Yeah.
And we started with principles. And I think there's too much, pop culture in general, but certainly even in the photography industry, it's very easy to talk about tips and tools and tricks and, little 15-second sound bites and you walk away with that. At the end of the day, I think where it's really at when it comes to building a healthy business and ultimately a healthy life is principles. We need to start with the principles and then we can get to the tools. So last week, episode 25, we started with the principles behind finding a healthy balance. And again, for everybody listening and watching, I realize it's a subjective thing. It's going to look different for different people, but finding a balance, whatever that might look like, between work and family life or work and personal life. And we talked about the principles behind that. This week, Meredith, we're going to get into the tools. And I think it's important, right? Somebody wouldn't go to the hospital with a gunshot wound and expect a Band-Aid, right? If we had just thrown out a few tools and tips and tricks, that would have been kind of the Band-Aid. Last week, we did the surgery. We removed the bullet. We did the surgery with the stitches and everything else. And this week now, we're going to talk about rehab. We're going to talk about how to move forward. Now that we've got the baseline fixed, the issues addressed, now we get to move forward with the tools of the trade. And I'm going to throw various tools out there based on your needs, what you're looking for in your business. And so we're going to make sure to include you in this conversation. I told you before we got started, I'm like, the last thing that I want is to have a monologue here where I'm just talking the whole time. Set us up for this first point. We're going to get into these tools. And again, for everybody listening and watching, I can't stress enough, go back to episode 25, start there if you haven't heard it already, start with the principles. Now we get to the tools. Once we've got that big picture view established, you know what you're spending your time, what you should be spending your time on based on those big picture goals. The question then is how to maximize efficiency with the things that you are spending your time on. And that's where these tools come in. The first thing that you talked to me about, that you shared with me, is that you needed to find a good system for accounting, software that would enable you to manage the numbers a little bit more effectively. Where are you at with that right now?
So I heard of Wave, so I signed up for Wave, but I have no idea what to do with it or if that is the best tool to use for accounting, or if there's something, to use to set up for keeping all your receipts intact and where do you keep your receipts and what do you do with all of them and everything like that.
That makes sense. Yeah, and you know what? For the sake of conversation today, for anybody who may be listening to the audio version, we are going to be pulling some of these websites up for those that watch the replay of the live stream or are watching the live stream. And I've got Wave here, and I'm at some point, Meredith, I may have heard of Wave. but I'm not super familiar with the app. I pulled up their website for anybody who's not live streaming with us. You can see manage your money like a boss. The subtext is Wave is one-stop money management for small business owners, which, by the way, sounds super appealing. I just don't know the platform, the system very well. Invoicing, payments, accounting, banking, payroll, advisors. Okay, so they've got a lot of features there. And if I just go to the click or the drop down on features even, I guess it's really just a replay of what I just read out. So here's the thing that we want to, when we think about tools, at least the way that I think about tools. So this is obviously going to be from my perspective, but I've been in business now in the photography industry for 20 plus years. I started back in 2001, had a photography business for about 10 years, and then started Photographers Edit during that time. And we're a multi-million-dollar company. We're getting ready to launch a whole different company and brands to go along with it. So I've got some experience here. The thing that I'm looking for in my life as a photography business owner and as an entrepreneur in general is to minimize the number of moving parts. Now, this is my preference. I realize that there may be some benefits to having many tools, whether it's photographic equipment or pieces of software or otherwise, to pull from many tools, because those individual tools are designed as specialty items or specialty tools specific for a particular set of tasks, right? Or maybe even an individual task. The problem with that, at least from my perspective as a business owner, is if I'm trying to create more freedom for myself as a business owner, as in I don't want to spend any more time than necessary in my businesses, because I want to your point, Meredith, you want to spend more time with your family, or you want to be able to, you may just want to take a break from family and sit and watch Netflix for an hour, right? Like that's what you're trying to shoot for here. So in order to do that, one of the ways that we do that, and I think we talked about this a little bit last week with the principles, but is to simplify our workflow. And the way that I define simplification is to minimize the number of moving parts. So to that end, when I look at pieces of software, and we're starting here with accounting, what I'm looking for is a solution that is, in an ideal world, a one-stop shop. Now, you always make compromises, whatever choice you make with whatever piece of software, right? It may be missing this little feature that this other company has or this other piece of software has. Same thing with cameras and gear and so forth. There's always some type of a compromise at hand. And as long as we just realize that and accept that, we can kind of get past it. And then what I would recommend is looking for a tool that has, let's call it at least 90% of what you need built into one place, into one tool. So when I look at Wave, for example, just as I'm skimming through there, maybe they have these features, but just at the outset, the feature list, I'm not seeing management of expenses, more specifically receipts, being able to track receipts. And so when I'm thinking about a platform that enables me not only to manage bookkeeping, accounting in general, bookkeeping, taxes, and of course, associated with that, tracking expenses, because I want to be able to report those expenses and ultimately be able to give all that data to my accountant. The first place that I personally go is QuickBooks. QuickBooks Online. Have you used QuickBooks at all in the past?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so let me actually just pop up the website here, and I pulled a number of these websites up, but we'll X out of Wave, and I'm going to come back to Expensify in just a second. But QuickBooks, most people have probably at least heard of it. But quickbooks.intuit.com is the actual URL. Of course, we'll link to all of these resources in the show notes at newbiepodcast.com. But QuickBooks, let's actually start with pricing, because this is a really fascinating thing to me still. You're looking at a range, depending on the feature set that you need. And most photography business owners probably can get away with the essentials, which is $27.50 a month. And then you could even get started even more simply for $15 a month. And that still has cash flow, mileage tracking, receipt capture, some of these things that you may need. So there's a good chance, Meredith, that you may even be able to start with that $15 a month option. Part of the reason that I emphasize or highlight the price point here is it's mind-blowing to me that we have access to these incredible tools for $15 to, let's say, $30 a month even. What that enables us to do in one place is really, really incredible. We do want to track our mileage to and from shoots, mileage to and from the store if we have to go pick up gear or supplies for a particular session or whatever it might be. We want to track our mileage. We do want to track our receipts. And then ultimately, of course, we want to keep all of our financial information in one place. Number one, for our own awareness, right? We want to, the QuickBooks is not just for putting numbers in so we can pay our sales tax or pay our quarterly taxes. It's also for becoming aware of what the cash flow looks like. Where am I losing money? Where am I making money? And addressing each of those areas. If I'm losing money somewhere, then I want to fix that leak. If I'm making more money in one particular place than I am in other places, then I might naturally just want to go focus on that area where I'm making the most money and double down on that. Or maybe if I don't want to do that, I know I'm making a lot of money here, I'm missing out here. I can look at some of that data, maybe use some of that information to make some changes to my business to bring in more revenue in this particular area of my business. Ultimately, it's just about awareness, right? But the cool thing is QuickBooks has what you were asking for, the ability to be able to capture receipts, track receipts, literally with their app, just take a picture of the receipt, upload it in. I think, don't quote me on this, but I believe it'll automatically scan your receipt for information on it, and at least enter as much of it as it recognizes when it does that scan into the system automatically. But receipt capture, mileage tracking, and then of course all the accounting and bookkeeping work that needs to be done all in one place. Now, the first thing I'll tell you is it's not easy per se. There is a lot of information in there, a lot of features built in. And if you're not an accountant, if you don't have that training, I certainly didn't, then you may need a little bit of hand-holding through the process. But if you want to help simplify, right, minimize stress, maximize efficiency, and ultimately have a one-stop shop for your accounting work, numbers tracking, obviously financial management in general, but again, managing expenses, managing income, paying taxes, and of course associated with that, tracking some of the expenses like being able to capture receipts and ultimately track mileage. This is the best one-stop shop that I can recommend to you.
Okay.
And my suggestion to you would be to do something that I did a number of years ago, which is to find an accountant, an accounting firm locally. If you're not already working with somebody, maybe you are, awesome, but that will empathize with your lack of information, your lack of knowledge, and be like, you know what? I got you. I got your back. I'm here not only to educate you as much as you need to be. We don't need to become accountants, right? We just need to know enough to be able to provide the information to the accountant to do their work. And again, to have a certain amount of awareness for the sake of developing or building our business. So somebody that can come alongside you and educate you with the information that you need, but then ultimately take the stress off your shoulders of the accounting and bookkeeping work behind the scenes and help you, of course, manage taxes and so forth. My suggestion would be find somebody that can help you with that. QuickBooks may have a tool that you can use to find accountants that are certified in QuickBooks. I think that was something a number of years ago that they did. I don't know if they still do or not. So you might start there. If nothing else, talk to fellow business owners in your marketplace and just get a good reference. Finances, managing numbers was not a strength of mine for a very long time. I've gotten much better at it. Awareness, understanding the information, how to apply it, et cetera. But it was a source of fear for me. And I won't go into the backstory because we don't have a lot of time here, but it just kind of freaked me out. It's just to put it really, really simply. So to have somebody like the accounting firm that I work with who is willing to just come alongside me and help me has been a godsend. Absolutely incredible. Can't recommend that enough. So my suggestion to you, go to QuickBooks as a one-stop shop for all of what you need. And then also along with that, if you don't have one already, find an accountant who is super helpful, empathetic, but that ultimately can do the hard work for you.
Okay.
Does that work?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Now, I'll mention as a side note. Yeah, well, I'll mention as a side note. I mentioned Expensify earlier, and I'll pull this back up on screen. For anybody who does need some type of separate expense tracking software or platform, I should say, there is the option to use something like Expensify, which, by the way, does plug into QuickBooks. There is and that's the other thing, Meredith, too, is if you do use outside tools, my suggestion would be to actually, starting with the base platform, use a base platform that has integrations. Like normally, if you go to a site like QuickBooks, you can look for integrations. If you do a search on their site, or you may just even see it pop up in the navigation, but look for integrations. So if you have to use a third-party tool like Expensify because maybe it has additional functionality that you feel like you're missing from QuickBooks, you want to use third-party tools that then integrate with that primary platform. Your go-to for financial management is QuickBooks. So if you have to use a third-party software in addition to that, you would want to find something that integrates with QuickBooks so that you can pull that data in automatically, ideally, and that way it doesn't kind of mess up your workflow. You want as few moving parts as possible, as smoothly and as automatically as possible. And Expensify is a tool that can plug in. I personally use Expensify because I have partners in my business and the way that we've got our financial structure set up, I have to report expenses. So I've gone ahead and subscribed to Expensify, which enables me to do exactly what you were talking about, which is to photograph receipts and ultimately report on a monthly basis or otherwise my expenses. And I can send all of that information over to the person who's doing our bookkeeping for us so they can see that. Otherwise, again, if I just had if I'm set up as a sole proprietor, QuickBooks is just the way to go. Okay.
Sounds good.
Now I realize I'm looking at the time here. We're 15 minutes in and we've only talked about the financial piece. Don't worry. We're going to cover all of this and I'll try to move a little bit more quickly. But I will say too, maybe there's a little bit of subconscious bias here because the thing about QuickBooks, I used QuickBooks basically from the beginning, or at least early on, back when it was like on CDs and I had to send a CD with data to my account. Like this is way back in the day, right? But what I will say is, what I didn't do well enough was to be super proactive, not only in getting the education that I needed to better utilize that software, but ultimately develop more awareness around not just, doing the basics in order to pay taxes, but actually learning the software so that I could look at the numbers associated with my business and make more intelligent decisions. So right. I'm just going to encourage you to learn to do that. It's not about, you're not going to be able to do this tomorrow or even next week. Right. It's going to take a little bit of time. But I promise you that if you are intentional about growing in that realm, individually and ultimately as a business, it will pay off dividends, because we brought in insane amounts of money as a photography business back in the day. But unfortunately, I didn't have near what I should have to show for all that success that we had booking clients, because I lacked education. I succumbed to my fear, and I ultimately wasn't intentional or proactive as I should have been. So I just want to really, really encourage you on that. And I don't mind too much that we spent that much time on it.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to keep going though, and I'll try to move a little bit more quickly. So that's accounting. You've been using Wave. I'm going to recommend QuickBooks, and really it's as simple as that in the end. Let's get to websites next. Tell me what the situation is now with your relatively new business. Where are you at with a website?
Just trying to figure out how to build a website or who to go to build a website. I use Pixaset to deliver my pictures to clients, and I know you can get a website through them, but even that, like, is that the best way to go, or is there's so many tools out there? It's like, which ones?
There really are so many different options. And I know we're going to get to this a little bit later in the conversation, but you talked about one of the questions that you had was with regards to education. Like, who do you ultimately trust, right? It's really hard to know who to trust. Am I listening to somebody who really only has a year and a half experience and they're just trying to like fake it till they make it and get by? And so I don't know if the information is reliable. If I'm listening to somebody talk about how to make six figures, but the reality is they don't really actually make six figures consistently? There's all these kind of questions, especially, it can become a little bit easy to get cynical in a world where there's just this massive education out there and everybody's trying to sell a course. But at the end of the day, what I can tell you is I had a photography business for 10 years, and we built that going from, I shot my first wedding for $350 to shooting 30 weddings on average or so a year, shooting for as much as $7,000 to $10,000 per wedding. And so that was the business that I was involved in, the photography business, for about 10 years or so. And then 2008 started Photographers Edit. And so that's about 14 years ago, and have built that into and I can't minimize this, but with my team, an incredible team, built that into a multi-million-dollar company. So that's my experience in a like super tiny nutshell. That's where I'm speaking from. And during that 20 years, I'm a nerd. So I've spent a lot of time researching the tools that I'm making recommendations for. And so that's where some of this information comes, not just simply running my own business, but ultimately just kind of more objectively looking at available tools and making decisions about what tools to use, not only in my business, but ultimately, of course, it enables me to make those recommendations to other photographers. So when it comes to websites, let me go ahead and I'm going to X out of our Expensify and QuickBooks websites. And of course, again, we will link to those in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com. But let's jump to websites. And I'm going to make a few different recommendations, Meredith. And in this case, whereas it might be a little bit more easy for me to say, you should go do this one thing like we did with QuickBooks, I'm going to give you 3 different options here to consider and maybe kind of pros and cons of all of them. Pixieset, just to be very clear up front, I don't know Pixieset's website development system, so I can't really speak to that effectively. They've been around as a gallery for a very long time, and I know there are so many photographers that are really happy with that that part of their service. I can't speak to the website. But when it comes to websites, we'll start with simplicity. Again, I'm a huge fan of that. And especially as you're getting started, if you don't have a lot of context to putting a website out there, how to get one launched, like how do I get the domain name connected with the website? And then how do I get an email address? And how do I get my logo up on the website? And then how do I put a picture there?
All of that.
All of that, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and just so you know, offline, I'm glad to help you with this stuff as much as I possibly can. But for everybody listening and for yourself as well, Squarespace is a great place to start. By the way, all the companies I'm mentioning today, there's no affiliation with. I don't have any kind of financial incentive for talking about them. But I personally use Squarespace for years now. I've got, 2 or 3 different websites on Squarespace personally at the moment. One of really the main reason that I use Squarespace, it's for its simplicity. It is. In fact, they've just more recently begun to implement more of a drag and drop interface into at least 1 or 2 of their plans that they have associated with their service. But it is, I was going to say drag and drop in that it is super easy to use. You basically follow their prompts, add the logo, pick a color, upload an image. You're just kind of following their instructions, and you're starting in many cases with a template. So you're like, oh, I like the way that this template looks. I'm just going to replace these images with mine. I'm going to put my logo in there, maybe change the navigation a little bit, but it is very user friendly and very easy to get started with. I want to say there was a website not too long ago that I helped get launched within the span of about an hour or so.
Wow.
So it really can be that simple. Now, ultimately, it can be as complicated as you want to too, right? Because you can add as many moving parts to that as you want. But at the end of the day, Squarespace, if you want something super simple, by the way, they also have SEO tools built in. But if you want something that has easy navigation, that kind of helps you, and in essence, almost handholds you through the process of getting a website launched, that's the place to go. And it's super inexpensive as well. And again, I've got at least 2 websites on there right now, personally. So if you want simplicity, that's going to be the first place that I recommend. By the way, the cool thing about that too is about their platform is that I believe most, if not all of their templates are also responsive, i.e. they work not only on a desktop computer, but also on a mobile phone as well. And that's important to note.
Okay.
So that's number 1 recommendation. And I guess I pulled it up briefly, but squarespace.com. Most people have probably heard of Squarespace before. Of course, we'll link to that in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com. The next one that I'm going to go to, Meredith, is Flow Themes. And Flow Themes was actually started by a friend of mine named Ross Tanner a number of years ago. And I recommend Flow Themes for a couple of different reasons. Number 1, again, just a super clean, simple, in this case, design. The design is just stunning. The templates that they have available, absolutely gorgeous. So that's the first kind of benefit there. But then the secondary benefit, which is really just as important, if not more so, is that it's built on WordPress. And I don't know if you know this, but the last I heard is something like 40 to 43% of the web, period, runs on WordPress. This is a very popular platform. And one of the things that they're known very well for is being super SEO friendly. So if you want to get found, it's not automatic, to be clear, but it is a great platform to develop your SEO plan on. They are super SEO friendly. So, and I'll add a third benefit of WordPress, because we actively use WordPress for at least 2 of our brands currently as well, is that there are just endless, because it's so popular, because so many, millions probably of people use WordPress, there are a lot of different plugins for the platform. So you can start with Flow Themes, which gives you kind of a structure to work within. You've got templates, you can modify those, make it about your brand. It's built on WordPress, a beautiful, beautiful solution by itself. And I'll pull this website back up here as we're talking. Create a custom photography website on WordPress. The subtext is no code knowledge required. Everything is intuitive, drag and drop. And if you scroll down through their site, I mean, it's just, I love good design, minimal design, simple design, lots of open white space. And you can see their design is very much catered to that or those principles. So I can't recommend it enough for that reason, but ultimately, again, it's built on WordPress, and it gives you a lot of control, a lot of flexibility, benefits when it comes to SEO. That would be the second recommendation that I would make. And then the third, Meredith, is, and I'm going to pull this back up here on screen so everybody can see. Last but certainly not least by any means is Show It. And my friend Todd Watson is the CEO and owner at Show It. And I've worked with them. I've used their product in the past as well. For Photographers Edit. Photographers Edit was actually on that on the Show It platform for a while. But Show It is a really, really powerful tool that and really as I'm scrolling, for anybody who's live streaming or watching the replay of the live stream, you can see this text here: freedom to create your website just the way you want it. Show It really for the longest time their focus has been about giving the photographer control. Essentially anything you can think of, you can make it happen. And not only they're a little bit of a different platform, and as far as I know, this is still how they work. You design the desktop version of your site, and you actually have to go in and kind of design or modify at least the mobile version for the sake of mobile. It's not automatically responsive. It doesn't all just kind of automatically fall into place for mobile. But what Show It does give you is an extreme amount of control. So that is one of the biggest benefits there. The second, and again, just as important, if not more so, in fact, I was just sponsoring a conference this week. They were a sponsor there as well. And I was talking to a photographer about Show It, talking about how incredible their team is, their support team is. If you want to buy into a brand with a website that has an incredible community behind it and ultimately has a really great support structure for you, where if you need help, they're going to take really great care of you, that's Show It as well. So those are three options. Squarespace, super simple. Flow Themes, gorgeous design built on WordPress. Show It, the ultimate in control. Their blog system is built on WordPress, if I remember, or if it still is. The last I heard, it was. So it's kind of a hybrid system, if you will. But a really incredible support structure and community behind Show It. So those are kind of the three website options that I'd recommend. Any questions about those?
No, I'm excited to go look at them.
Okay, cool. So yeah, some of these I'll give you more options than others, but at least you'll know kind of the benefits of each, and ultimately you can make a decision based on those. Price point, I would say Squarespace certainly is going to be the cheapest. Show It might be next, and then Flow Themes maybe the top as far as the price point is concerned. Okay, so let's jump to CRM is the next point of conversation. Again, this is one of those conversations where, because, Meredith, there are so many CRMs in the industry, we could go one direction or another. There are pros and cons of these various systems. The one that I'm going to recommend today, and in part because of the conversation that I actually heard while I was at the conference over the last couple of days, further emphasizing what I knew about Dubsado, but is Dubsado. So I had, and I'll pull this up as we're talking. Anybody listening, if you go to Dubsado, DUBSADO.com, you can see this. Make managing client projects the easiest part of business. And ultimately, really, it is a CRM, but I don't want to treat that lightly or minimize the significance of what the system does. We scroll down just a little bit further: customizable form templates, easy to pay online invoices, personable automation, interactive client portraits, and then built-in schedule. And so there's a lot of functionality built in there. And again, Meredith, if you're looking for something that is kind of a one-stop shop, that is what I'm going to recommend. Did I say Dubsado? I did say Dubsado. Dubsado is an option. What I actually meant to say, I'm going to throw this additional option up. And the one that I actually heard quite a bit about over, let me pull this up here. There we go. Okay, so Dubsado is fine. That is one of the ones that I heard at the conference the last little while, and certainly it's been in the industry for years. The other one that I want to recommend, though, actually, a little slip of the tongue, but is Sprout Studio. This is the one that I heard endless good things about at the conference that I was sponsoring this week. But I also have had Brian Caprici, who is the CEO of Sprout, on the show before. So anybody listening in, if you go to episode 475, Brian came on the show and shared a little bit with us. And Meredith, I don't know about you, but there's something kind of nice about being able to make a personal connection with the people behind a particular brand. And Brian is behind Sprout. I don't know why Dubsado. Dubsado was one of the other options I had listed right here, so that may have been why it popped up. The first recommendation, though, that I wanted to make was about Sprout. And the reason for this, and I'll pull up their website as we're talking here, but we go to Sprout Studio, just like it sounds. Anybody listening in or watching, SproutStudio.com. And let's actually go to the homepage in case I'm not there. Yeah, there we go. GetSproutStudio.com takes us to the primary homepage. And it says, want more creativity and less nitty gritty? Use Sprout Studio as your secret weapon and make a living doing what you love. Your new studio management suite all in one place. Sprout Studio helps you build your photography business with a consistent brand, great client communications, helps you know what to focus on while streamlining the business stuff. With Sprout, you can keep everything in one place so nothing falls through the cracks. And as we scroll down further, and I'm not going to read the whole website here, but you can see that you pretty much have everything you can imagine that you would need in a website. And as they say, and more. So collect leads from your website, book clients, a beautiful visualizer and online galleries, proof your albums and layout with clients, design stunning emails for marketing. I know we're going to talk about marketing here in just a second. But you pretty much have a one-stop shop with this system. And so not only is Brian a really, really good guy, super smart business person as well. I've had personal conversation with him. But if you want to go check out that episode 475, by the way, of the Boca podcast, just to be clear, I have to remember I have two different podcasts. Episode 475 of the Boca, BOKEH podcast.com for anybody listening in. You can learn a little bit more about Brian, but also learn about the brand as well. And Sprout is really a great place to go for kind of a one-stop shop. Now, to kind of backtrack really quick, I mentioned Dubsado. That's another option you can take a look at. Honeybook is another one that comes up a good bit. So check out those three as some solutions. This is one where I'm going to encourage you, though, to maybe focus most of your time on Sprout. Again, because I know the person behind it, and also because of the wonderful things that I've heard of it. And again, if you want that to minimize the number of moving parts, you want to go one place to kind of take care of it all, then that would be a great place to go. Which naturally is a segue to the next point that you brought up with me, which is email management. And are you talking about designing email campaigns, or what are you looking for in email management?
Even just how to like collect people's emails. And I don't know if it was on one of the episodes on this podcast, but somebody was saying that you can't just sign people up for the emails. You have to have their permission. So Correct. You can't just take the email that they had given you when you booked them Correct. And sign them up for, so like I've heard Flowdesk for that, but I don't know how that works.
Yeah. So Flowdesk, and if I remember correctly, well, I don't want to speak out of turn. Flowdesk is a fine tool to use. My suggestion again, though, to you would be to stick with, if you can, a one-stop shop, just right. to simplify your life at this point. In the future, as you're feeling the flexibility, you've got your rhythm, you've got your workflow going, and you want to branch out, great. But just simplify your life, keep it as easy as possible by minimizing the number of tools you have to implement. And in this case, Sprout has email marketing built in addition to being a CRM. So first of all, you want to collect email addresses when somebody, first of all, let's just say signs up for an inquiry or ultimately books you as a photographer. You can do all of that through that platform. But then if they do give you permission, then you can ultimately send them email marketing as well. And all of that is built into Sprout. So my suggestion would be to go there versus trying to take on an additional platform, just to keep your life as simple as possible.
Yeah, I like that.
So check out Sprout. Again, just to reiterate for anybody listening and reviewing, this is none of these are paid advertisements. These are just recommendations based on my experience in the industry, personal experience using the product, and ultimately what I've heard from photographers as well, as I mentioned, especially with Sprout. It was actually pretty interesting, and hearing the positive commentary on the system in the last couple of days. So yeah, check that out for sure. And then when it comes to email management, again, I would just stick with that very same platform, not only for managing the collection of email addresses, but ultimately any email marketing that you might want to do. And then we'll jump to the legal part, contracts. Tell me where you're at with contracts and kind of what you're looking for there.
I don't do contracts because I don't know how to write one up, and I don't know anything about them. I just know when I book a photographer, I have to sign a contract. So I'm like, oh, I should probably be doing that.
Yeah. And so there are, as you probably know too, there are so many different directions you can go with legal documents these days. You can go to a place like LegalZoom and download a template and customize it for yourself. You may even be able to customize it before you download it. But there's these various sites that you can go to where you can download these legal documents. The caveat being that they are just that, they're templates, right? So they may work generally speaking, but maybe your business model is a little bit different. Or maybe you want to emphasize that you need to highlight particular areas of your business model for the sake of the end client, and those aren't highlighted in these particular contracts. My suggestion would be to work with somebody like Paige Griffith. So Paige has been, and I'll pull this up here as we're talking, Paige has been on the show a couple of different times. And again, it's the Boca podcast that she's been on, BOKEH podcast.com for anybody who is not familiar. But the legal page, PAIGE.com. My suggestion would be to go to Meredith to her site. She does have, if I remember correctly, she does. Yeah, you can see actually right here, shop the contract template. So she's got templates there. But the thing about the templates that she's created is that they are, I believe she's got templates specific to the photography industry. So rather than just going and downloading a generic template from like LegalZoom, for example, where, you know, maybe it kind of covers the basics, but you don't know if it's going to cover you specifically as it relates to your photography business. What happens if you get sick and you can't show up, or, you know, how are people able to, what are people able to do with your images? What rights do they have? The stuff that we need to be paying attention to as photographers. My suggestion would be to go to Paige. Not only do you have access to templates and should have access specifically to templates for photographers, but the other piece is Paige is there. Like Paige is an attorney, so you can actually reach out to Paige and get assistance or guidance or potential modifications for your contract or contracts if need be. And so that's where I'm going to send you. I don't know about you, but I like to be able to have my person. Like when I think about my accounting, Rachel is the name of the accountant at the firm that I work with. And I worked with Rachel now for probably, I don't know, 12, 14 years, maybe longer. So when I think accounting, I'm like, Rachel, I have a question about accounting. I need to go to Rachel. I need to talk to Rachel. If I need to have a question about this particular thing, I want to go to this person or that person. The idea of having somebody in your corner like Paige, who's a wonderful individual, by the way, and for anybody who has not heard Paige's episodes on the Boca podcast, it's episode 130 and episode 333 are the two episodes that we had her on the show. So Meredith, if you're curious, again, you want to know who's behind all that, you can go listen to one or both of those. But it's just nice to feel, I don't know, like just at ease, right? Like I don't know anything about the legal side of things. I know very little about accounting. I want to be able to trust the person I go to, ask questions, and not have to stress about it, not have to worry about it. And I think it's really cool to be able to go to somebody like Paige to get that. So I don't want to minimize templates per se, because obviously she sells templates there, but you should be able to go to Paige and get templates specific to your business model. And if not, then again, you can go to Paige and actually have her customize, or likely have one customized specifically for your business. And then the cool thing is with Sprout Studio, we mentioned earlier, Sprout, you can actually upload your document or copy paste your legal document contracts, the text for the contract into Sprout, which you can use then over and over again as a template. You can actually save your contracts as a template and use that in your workflow in Sprout, which is pretty cool as well.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
Last thing that we get to here, and I know we've gone long for a newbie podcast. In fact, this is the longest episode we've ever done on the newbie podcast, but education. And of course, we don't have to name names or brands, but what has your experience been with education thus far? And do you have particular areas that you're wanting to learn more about when it comes to the photography industry?
Just so like I'm in college, like I have a bunch of professors that I've been learning from, and I enjoy that because like you said, it's like, that's my person. I can go to them. I know who's behind the screen when I'm talking to
it's comfortable. It's nice.
Yeah. And then I did a mentorship program with another photographer, which was amazing. And again, I get to talk to her, and I'm still in contact with her. But like you said earlier, it's just there's so like I've been listening to so many podcasts, and then I've been going to so many people's pages, and then so many people offer courses, and it's like, how many courses do I want to pay for? What's the best, how do I find what's the best for me?
Right. And this is going to be I'm going back to the simple theme again. This is going to be a relatively simplistic answer, but my recommendation, as I was thinking about this and preparing for our conversation, my recommendation to you is not to go just randomly into a Google search or even into a Facebook group. My suggestion would be to go to photographers that you know, start there, and actually get recommendations. And not because they heard of this person, oh yeah, I heard of this particular workshop, or I heard of this course, but either that they can speak to, or they know somebody very well who can speak to the actual benefit that they got from that particular course or from that individual photographer. I've been in the industry long enough that I've seen, in fact, I've been in the industry long enough where early on when I started, education as we know it today in the industry was not really a thing. And we kind of make fun of my age here, but when the so-called education was either books So you went and picked up a portrait photography book at Barnes & Noble, or you ordered a CD or a DVD, actually it had been a DVD, I guess, from a photographer's website in order to look at that. And I had at some point, I don't know, probably 5, 6, 7, 8 DVDs from various photographers with education on it. And you would watch these and that would be kind of your education. But it wasn't, because we didn't have the tool set back then that was as inexpensive as it is now, it was a lot harder for an individual photographer to put out education, right? So there was that barrier to entry, which meant that there were less choices, and hopefully the choices, at least some of them, were better. Now, because we all have access to these tools that enable us to put on a webinar and put together a course and put somebody in a sales funnel and send them automatic, emails 50 times a month, and all the stuff that photographers are doing now, it's very easy to get lost in the what has become chaotic photography education industry. So it's kind of old school mentality, but my suggestion would be, rather than just simply doing a Google search or even jumping into a Facebook group and seeing a few people say, oh, this thing was awesome, my recommendation would be to have individual conversations. And a Facebook group's not a bad place to start. If you start there and you see, let's say 10 people that are like, oh my goodness, you got to check out this thing for this particular purpose, or this course for that reason, or that workshop or that, then follow up with those individuals, have individual conversations with them, and try to get hard information, like tangible information from them. Not just, oh, that was really awesome, but it made a difference in my business in these specific ways. Get real tangible information from them and base your decisions about where to go on that. Because you're absolutely right, there are endless options out there. Yeah. And they're not all built to the same quality. Whether it's a course or a workshop or a webinar or otherwise, not all the same. And the intentions from the photographers behind those courses and those conferences, maybe not necessarily the same. It's hard to know, right? It really is. At the end of the day, it's hard to know. So yeah, it's as simple as that. I would chat with individual photographers, get recommendations. Again, not just based on broad generalizations, but specifically how that course or that education made a difference in their business. And if you're hearing real information from even 2 or 3 photographers that can speak specifically to those results, I would tend to go that direction.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah, I know it's not earth-shattering, but it's funny. And I think this is a great way to close our conversation today, not only as an encouragement for you, but also for listeners in general. This is a podcast that's geared toward new photographers. And at the end of the day, the things that will make the biggest impact in your business, and I've realized this more, not just about my business, but life in general, especially in the last 6 months to a year, is that the things that make the biggest impact in life and business are not these earth-shattering brand new concepts that take eons to learn. They're actually the basic principles, kind of like what we talked about in episode 25 last week. It's the basic principles that do much of the heavy lifting. And so it's not about being earth-shattering, it's just realizing what primary principles work, applying those consistently, and that even applies to finding good education. So those are my recommendations for you today. Any questions about any of that or comments, follow up on any of that?
I don't think so. You gave me so much to look into and think about, and I'm excited to start.
Okay, good. And I'm so sorry. This has gone way longer than originally planned. I think we're almost 45 minutes in. Normally we shoot for 15 to 20 minutes, but I hope it was helpful. And for anybody listening and watching, all of the resources that we mentioned today, we'll be linking to in the show notes at Noobie Podcast, NOOBIE podcast.com. In this conversation with Meredith, of course, we'll create a post there at newbiepodcast.com, and then we'll have the show notes to go along with that. For those of you listening and watching, please also take advantage of show notes from the previous episodes as well. We'll make sure to link to the resources that we talk about there on the show. Meredith, thank you so much for being willing to do the show. I know I'm supposed to be the one talking. I feel so bad for basically doing a monologue here, but I hope it was super helpful for you.
It was. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Everybody listening and watching, make sure to subscribe to Noobie Podcast on Instagram. Keep up to date with the upcoming live streams. Make sure that you subscribe on your favorite podcast player to the Noobie Podcast, and you can listen to the latest episode. Everybody have an absolutely wonderful day. Thanks again, Meredith.